In this video, I'm going to share my thoughts regarding the tremendous 2019 vintage for Brunello di Montalcino. On this channel, I frequently recommend that viewers stock up on strong vintages, and 2019 is definitely the best vintage for Brunello di Montalcino since 2016. Many of these wines are already being offered on futures, although they won't be released until January. I was able to taste about 69 of these future releases at a Benvenuto Brunello event that was conducted a couple days ago, and I'll be sharing my favorites in this video. Before discussing the specific wines, some background information regarding Brunello di Montalcino is instructive. Brunello di Montalcino is made from 100% Sangiovese. So why do they call it Brunello? Well, they use the term brun because brun means brown and the wine was dark. They added the ello because Muscadello was a common grape in Tuscany at the time, so they combined it to get Brunello, and then added Montalcino to reflect the town of origin. While Brunello di Montalcino is wildly popular today, this is a relatively recent development. In fact, in the 1960s, there were only 11 commercial producers and around 65 hectares planted to vine. Fast forward to today, and now there are more than 280 bottling wineries and 3,500 hectares planted to vine, out of around 31,000 or so total hectares. Brunello di Montalcino received DOC certification in 1966, and it was the very first red wine to achieve the DOCG designation in 1980. Montalcino is located in southern Tuscany. It's generally warmer and drier than Chianti Classico. In fact, their rainfall is typically ideal for Sangiovese. In addition, the Mediterranean Sea is only about 40 kilometers away. So there's cooling breezes that help to preserve acidity and freshness in the fruit. The elevations tend to range from around 120 meters above sea level to around 500 meters above sea level. In addition to having vineyards planted at varying elevations, the soils can vary as well, and the area in which the fruit is grown in Montalcino can definitely have an impact on the resulting wines. For example, while there are always some exceptions, in general, to the north, the vineyards are planted at higher elevations in a slightly cooler area and with more galestro soils. This results in wines that tend to be a little bit lighter, with higher acidity, a little bit more elegance, and which have more aromatic intensity. In contrast, in general, the south has vineyards planted at lower elevations and with more clay soils. The result is wines that tend to have a little bit more full body, slightly higher ABV in riper fruit, and with slightly less aromatic intensity. Unlike in Chianti Classico and Chianti generally, producers are not allowed to blend additional grapes into their Sangiovese. Brunello di Montalcino must be 100% Sangiovese. In addition, Brunello must mature for a substantial period of time before it's released, which helps explain part of the reason why it's a little bit more costly than some other wines. Specifically, Brunello may not be sold until 5 years after harvest, and it must spend 2 years of that time maturing in oak. Similarly, Brunello di Montalcino Reservas may not be sold until 6 years after harvest, and also must spend 2 years of that time in oak. Despite the fact that there's an oak maturation requirement, there are no specific types of oak or sizes of oak that producers are required to use. So you will find substantial variation, and this can have a big impact on the wines. For example, traditional producers tend to use large, old Slavonian oak casks that don't impart much in the way of oak influence into the wines. In contrast, there's some more modern producers that use new, smaller French oak barriques, which can impart substantial oak influence into the wines. What is it that makes the 2019 vintage so special, and why does it have a 5-star rating? Well, to make a long story short, the weather was practically perfect. The temperatures were moderate with very few heat spikes. Due to these moderate temperatures, as well as accumulated water reserves, the grapes were allowed to ripen gradually and slowly over an extended growing season. The result was fruit that had perfect phenolic and technological ripeness. This in turn resulted in wines that are characterized by elegance, finesse, and precision, and which are extremely well balanced. Since the 2018 Reservas are coming out as well, just a couple quick notes about the 2018 vintage. That vintage received a 4-star rating, It was definitely a little bit cooler, and the wines have a little bit less structure than those from 2019. In fact, in some instances, I tasted the 2019 Annata next to a 2018 Reserva, and the 2019 definitely seemed to have a little bit more structure and power to it. With that by way of background, we're ready to discuss the specific wines and some of my recommendations from the tasting. In all, there were 70 wines available to taste, and I managed to get through 69 of them. The only reason that I have a blemish is because one of them ran out before I got to it. And I'll definitely be discussing both the Argano and the Il Poggione, but I'll be doing that later in the video, so please be sure to stick around for those discussions. Three of my favorite wines from the tasting all come from the exact same producer, Legerla. Legerla was founded back in 1975 when the owner purchased a 6.5 hectare parcel of vines that used to be part of the Biondi Santi estate from Tancredi Biondi Santi's daughter. Subsequently, Legerla established another parcel of vines in Castelnuovo dell'Abate, which is in southeast Montalcino. And so it's these two vineyard sources that contribute the fruit for their outstanding wines. Legerla was one of the first 36 or so bottling wineries to produce Brunello di Montalcino. As such, it makes very classic and traditional Brunello di Montalcino. One of the things I like best about all their wines is that they were characterized by impressive purity of fruit, and they're extremely elegant. The first of the three impressive Legerla wines that I tasted was the 2019 Legerla Brunello di Montalcino. This wine is made from a blend of fruit from each of their two vineyards. So some of the fruit comes from the parcel that used to be owned by Biondi Santi, and the rest of the fruit comes from the parcel in southeast Montalcino in Castelnuovo dell'Abate. This wine is matured in large Slavonian oak casks, and it was really elegant and impressive. Descriptors included mixed berry, licorice, violet, and there was ample acidity and velvety tannins. The second Legerla wine that I really enjoyed was also from the 2019 vintage, but this wine was a single vineyard wine named La Pieve. The La Pieve vineyard was planted back in 1998, so the vines have around 20 years or so of age on them. La Pieve is located in Castelnuovo dell'Abate, so this is not part of the original Biondi Santi estate, but rather the other parcel that is owned by Legerla. Descriptors for this wine were fairly consistent with the Annata, except that this one probably had both red and black cherry and also had some crushed rock to it that I found to be particularly intriguing. The other Legerla wine that I really enjoyed is another single vineyard wine, but this time it's a single vineyard wine from the plot that used to be owned by Biondi Santi. This special wine is named for this 1 hectare parcel that has old vines that are 25 years or so of age, and translated it means Vineyard of the Angels. This is the 2018 Reserva. This special wine is not made every year. It's only made when they think they can put out a very strong wine, and definitely this qualifies, as it was certainly one of my favorite 2018 Reservas from this tasting. It had a particularly intriguing minty descriptor that I enjoyed, as well as the customary Brunello descriptors. La Fortuna is a consistently strong producer of Brunello that traces its roots way back to 1907. I enjoyed both wines that I tried from this producer. They both showed a rich, ripe fruit profile, but there was an earthiness to it, and the wines were not overly sweet. They definitely had some formidable tannins that will need to be resolved before you enjoy the wines. The 2019 Brunello di Montalcino is a wine that you definitely can't go wrong with, but my favorite of the two wines is called Giobbe. Giobbe is a wine that's produced with fruit grown from a cooler location, and this allows the fruit to ripen over a very extended period of time. The result is a wine with tremendous depth of flavor and intensity. There's also incredible structure for this wine, and this wine is going to be extremely age-worthy. So if you're interested in La Fortuna wines, I would probably get some of the Annata, as well as a couple of bottles of the Giobbe that you can put away so you can enjoy it with some additional bottle age. I tried two wines from Carpaneto, and I enjoyed both of them. Carpaneto has one vineyard, and it has a unique microclimate as it's located at 500 meters elevation, and thus is at one of the highest altitudes for Montalcino. As a result, these wines were definitely characterized by elegance and finesse. Despite its youth, the 2019 Carpaneto Brunello di Montalcino displayed a complex nose with numerous well-delineated descriptors, such as wild cherry, crushed rock, orange peel, and mixed spice. This was a very elegant wine that really stood out in this lineup. I also enjoyed the 2018 Carpaneto Brunello di Montalcino Reserva. This was definitely one of my favorite reservas from the lineup, and it had extremely impressive purity of fruit and, again, just impressive elegance. If you're interested in wine recommendations, wine collecting strategies, and learning more about wine, please do subscribe to my channel. I've been collecting wine for more than 15 years and also have a level 4 diploma from the WSET. So I have both formal certification as well as substantial practical knowledge from the School of Hard Knocks. Larena is another high-quality producer of Brunello. Its estate is located very close to Biondi Santi and Casanova di Neri, so certainly a very prestigious neighborhood. Larena's vineyards are planted around 400 meters above sea level, and it produces about 30,000 bottles of wine per year. The Larena 2019 Brunello di Montalcino is definitely one of the wines that was a standout from this tasting. This wine had more of a dark fruit profile, so descriptors included black cherry, mixed spice, balsamic, and tobacco. This wine also had very silky tannins that I appreciated. Definitely be sure to keep an eye out for this one when it's released in January. Next up is the 2019 Corte Pavone Loacare Brunello di Montalcino Campo Mario. This impressive single vineyard wine is made from vines that average 60 years of age. There was a mixed red and blue fruit profile and also some intriguing floral aromatics that I really enjoyed. This wine had impressive balance between the flavor intensity, the acidity, and the tannic structure. So definitely another wine that I'll be keeping an eye out for once it's released. Dolce is one of the oldest producers in Montalcino. It is certified organic, and it's very much a traditional producer that matures its Brunello in large Slavonian oak casks. The Dolce 2019 Brunello di Montalcino was certainly one of the more enjoyable wines at this tasting. It's a very solid wine that I expect would probably score somewhere in the 93 to 95 point range. Another wine I very much enjoyed at the tasting was the 2019 Donatella Cinelli Colombini Brunello di Montalcino. Not their standard annata bottling, but rather a special wine that's made from a selection of some of their best fruit. There's an interesting backstory for this wine, as at the time they came out with this wine, the producer didn't like the fact that most of the wine critics that had popularity were all males, and so she assembled an all-female tasting panel to determine the blend for this special wine. This is a wine that was extremely elegant and stood out by virtue of its refinement. It's probably one you could also enjoy on the early side. The 2019 Uccata Brunello di Montalcino was another wine that really popped in this lineup of 70 wines that I tasted the other day. Uccata is located in the south portion of Montalcino. As such, this wine was definitely a little bit more full-bodied with 15% alcohol by volume, but yet it was very well balanced as well. It also showed impressive complexity for a wine at this stage of its development. For that reason, it's definitely a wine that I'm going to keep on my short list and potentially consider purchasing once it's released in January. Argano is a trending Brunello producer, having recently won Wine Spectator's Wine of the Year with its 2018 Brunello di Montalcino. While the 2018 was not in this lineup, I was able to try the 2019 Brunello di Montalcino from Argano. Argano is located in the southwest portion of Montalcino, and this is definitely apparent in the glass. This is a full-bodied expression of Brunello with ripe, sweet fruit. This one had more of a darker fruit profile, so black cherry and black currant, and there was also a spiciness to it. This is one you could probably enjoy on the earlier side, as the tannins were not overly grippy. I definitely expect that this wine will receive critical acclaim and high scores again in the 2019 vintage. While it's not in my personal wheelhouse, it's definitely one you'll want to consider if you enjoy the riper, sweeter style of Brunello. Il Poggione is one of the original 3 producers of Brunello di Montalcino, and it is now being run by the 5th generation. The 2019 Brunello di Montalcino from Il Poggione was absolutely one of my favorite wines from this tasting. Il Pogione makes its Brunello from vines that are at least 20 years old. This wine made an immediate impression with its intensity, power, and concentration, but it also has ample acidity and freshness. It does have extraordinary structure, and it will benefit from additional time in the bottle. So I'm definitely going to be a buyer of this one, but it's definitely going to be one that I'll probably put away for at least a decade. You're definitely going to want to give this one some serious consideration, as it's certainly one of the stronger efforts for Il Pogione that I've tasted in recent vintages, and I expect that it's going to receive tremendous critical acclaim.